A lion ran into his adopted human father's arms upon realizing who he was. Not only do our dogs feel happy when they encounter familiar faces, but so do us. You may have seen videos online of dogs whose owners enlisted in the military, leaping with excitement as their closest buddies come home. Does this, however, apply to all animals? You'll realize that at least one lion in this world truly understands who his true buddies are after viewing this video. Welcome to USA Stories channel. Do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell button to receive all new updates. Now let's go to the story. It's obvious that the 1960s, a period of pleasure and freedom, were special in London, England. Adopting the free love and anti-war ethos of the day, swinging London turned became the nation's hub for counterculture, including the Beatles, flower power, eye-popping colors, and experiences that opened people's minds. It should come as no surprise that London attracted the type of people that didn't exactly fit in with conventional British families, what with all this hippie energy in the air. For some, the city was the place to be hip, unique, and perhaps even a bit crazy. It is thus not unexpected that the two Australian entrepreneurs who relocated to the big metropolis in 1969 considered this chance to be the greatest adventure of their young life. Australian-born Ace Burke and John Rendall were childhood pals. Following their university graduations, they parted ways, but fortunately made the decision to go to London apart from one another. They agreed to go into business together after running into one other again there. These two boys clearly felt that their distinct desires to travel to the same large metropolis after parting ways were more than coincidental. Combining their finances, they took an apartment on King's Road, which at the time was the hippest street in central London. They made the decision to stay above Sophisticat, a hip furnishings retailer. They had no idea how fitting the moniker would become for what they were about to do. Similar to now, Harrods had an unofficial business motto back then: you could get anything at Harrods. It seems that Burke and Rendall made the decision to push this assertion to the farthest and discover the lengths Harrods will go to maintain their stellar image. This is the reason the two Australian boys pushed Harrods to give them a lion on that fateful day in 1969. Not a stuffed animal, not a lion skin, but a real, breathing lion. As said at the beginning of the film, London during the 1960s was truly unique. The two young guys didn't dismiss them as pre-internet trolls. Instead, they walked out there and started looking for a lion while maintaining a stiff upper lip. Their labor was not required to last long. Coincidentally, in a nearby zoo, a couple of lions had recently given birth to a litter of pups. Whatever the resolute shop owner said to the bewildered zookeepers, we'd like not to think about what transpired during the exchange between a representative from the most well-known department store in London and the keeper of the animals. Clearly worked. After an agreement was made, Harrods phoned Burke and Rendall with some exciting news. They could pick up their brand new lion in person at Harrods. They gave him a name, Christian the Lion, and they did exactly that. Now, perhaps the majority of people would believe that this small joke had gotten a little too far by now. Harrods was pressured by Burke and Rendall to give them a lion, and to their surprise, they obliged. Not these two, though. They didn't even object when they thought about making the transaction. Remember that they were two young guys having a good time in the world's trendiest city. Having a lion in London at the time wasn't as remarkable. In subsequent years, Rendall would say, "There were so many extraordinary things going on," to Meredith Vieira of The Today Show. There was music in London in the swing. The Beatles and the Rolling Stones would frequently be seen traveling down King's Road. Whether they were strolling the new cub down the street or dining with him at a neighborhood restaurant, they had no trouble blending in, especially given how accepting of the counterculture their new home was. Only two Aussies and a lion, they were a staple. "Imagine being known in your circle of friends as the lion guy," Rendall remarked of the encounter. Not only did Burke and Rendall accept it, but they also rapidly discovered the ideal method to coexist with lions. Living with a lion is not precisely the same as living with a dog, as anyone who has ever tried something similar will quickly discover. The lion would be very adamant about not being led around. In essence, Burke and Rendall discovered that no one actually owns a lion. Humans are never in control. If anything, they needed to put themselves in the shoes of their new visitor and treat him or her like a loyal friend. More significantly, they could never behave as though they were terrified of the lion in front of him. They would never dare to force their will on their cuddly little companion. The lion would never allow them to forget that he was the pack leader, even if they ever shown fear. And that was one thing these two boys could not afford to have to cope with: a lion in their life that was unstoppable and dominant. As a result, the ground rules were established rather quickly. They respected one another's personal space and interacted on an equal footing whenever possible. And for a time, everything looked to be working. They had a great rapport. Nevertheless, all good things had to come to an end, and this youngster was clearly beginning to mature. After a while, Burke and Rendall found themselves in the possession of a fully grown lion that was consuming copious amounts of meat and occupying an apartment. Great was great, but in the end, they had to admit that a lion had no place on London's King's Road, and they would have to release him if they truly loved him. Around this time, they came to the notice of George Adamson, a well-known wildlife conservationist with a penchant for lions. In essence, he dedicated the last years of his life to releasing imprisoned lions back into the wild. Adamson was keen to get any lions that had been raised in captivity back into the wild, train them how to live there, and give them a fighting chance in their natural environment. Thus, the two Australians decided to give Christian over to Adamson after getting to know and meet the well-known lion specialist. He was going to take Christian all the way to Kenya and try to acclimate him to life in the bush, which was something neither he nor his captors had ever experienced. That was around the end of 1969. John Rendall and Ace Burke returned to their normal lives and finally secured lucrative jobs in London. In 1971, the two buddies realized they had lost their peculiar and distinctive little trio. They boarded a plane to travel to George Adamson's ranch in Kenya, curious about the well-being of their old acquaintance, Christian the lion. Adamson took great care to avoid raising their expectations. He said that Christian had settled in nicely to his new life on the savannah. In fact, it frequently happened that Christian would go days without seeing Adamson on his routine visits to see his animal buddies. All he could surmise was that Christian was thoroughly enjoying his newfound freedom. Even that he might not recognize the life he had left behind was a possibility. However, Burke and Rendall didn't mind because they were desperate to see their pal and were missing him terribly. They pitched their tent in Adamson's tent and waited, but not for very long. On the third day, Christian strolled across the region with his new pride of lionesses. This lion chose to introduce himself to the three humans over their midday meal by giving them one of the coziest, most comforting embraces they had ever received. This 500-pound lion not only embraced his two former housemates, but footage captured the moment with all the vigor a predator could muster. He was obviously overjoyed to meet his old buddies from London. Burke and Rendall knew by all accounts that it was one of Christian's best moments ever. Following their reunion with their old buddy, Burke and Rendall had to go back to their regular lives, which was not an easy task given what they had just gone through. Nevertheless, they planned to return to Kenya in the next years to check on Christian. Even though he was the pride's leader at that point, and somewhat enormous by then, he still made an effort to curl up on people's laps, just like he did when he was a furry little bye from Harrods. A Lion Called Christian, the book they authored about their encounter with the lion, was reissued in 2009 as YouTube began to gain popularity and a whole new audience was able to witness the video of his joyful reunion. The two swinging Londoners were undoubtedly altered by the encounter. Inspired by Christian's response to their generosity, they committed their own lives to the preservation of nature. Christian vanished from the old friends' lives tragically after 1971, but George Adamson clarified that he wasn't really concerned about it. He said that if a hunter had brought down a 500-pound lion from a preserve, word would have spread across every town for kilometers. Much more probable, Christian traveled north and lived out his days as a free and contented lion, maybe with occasional flashbacks of his former flatmates, but content nonetheless. These two Australian children from swinging London became close and formed a connection that they would always remember. Has there ever been a pet in your life that felt that way about you? Would you go to the other side of the globe to see your contented buddy released? Please share your own tales of happy, furry pals in the comments section below. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos. If you enjoyed the tale, the next video that plays on your screen will probably move you too.